What you're seeing there, my friends, is the removal of the Black Lives Matter mural in D.C. And I would argue to you that it is a symbol. It is symbolic of the larger dismantling of the whole of the Democratic Party. And I'm not even remotely exaggerating here. Take a look at this. There are calls now for Congress to investigate the now defunct ActBlue. Now, if you don't know, ActBlue is was the premier Democrat political action committee. According to reports, ActBlue has raised billions of dollars for the Democrats. Billions with a B. We're talking as of 2024, ActBlue raised a total of $13 billion for the Democrats. I mean, look at this headline. ActBlue rakes in nearly $50 million within 7 hours after Kamala Harris announced the launch of her presidential campaign. That's the kind of power we're talking about, the financial power. ActBlue was a fundraising powerhouse par excellence. We didn't have anything, Republicans had nothing even comparable to what the Democrats had in terms of fundraising apparatus. And now it's officially defunct. ActBlue has imploded. The New York Times, of all places, is being forced to report on this. ActBlue is, in their words, quote, in turmoil. It's experiencing mass resignations. 7 of their top executives have all left in the past 3 weeks. None of them will explain on record why they left. 2 unions representing ActBlue employees, they're all questioning the group's stability. They're calling the situation, quote, alarming. And these unions are even themselves calling on ActBlue to be investigated. The last remaining lawyer at ActBlue's general counsel's office, he's been locked out of his email and put on leave. And the reason why these growing voices want ActBlue investigated, the primary reason, is it looks like ActBlue has been nothing more ultimately than a taxpayer-funded money laundering operation. More and more observers are finding it strangely coincidental that the moment USAID funds dried up, the moment USAID funds were pulled from Democrat-controlled NGOs, all of a sudden, we saw the disappearance of small dollar donations to ActBlue. And then, of course, just a few weeks later, by February, 7 top ActBlue executives abruptly resign. Why? How was ActBlue implicated in all of this? What did these executives know? And when did they know it? You see, that's what people want to find out. Now, if you don't know, thanks to Doge, it's now being revealed that USAID, which itself is now defunct, was itself primarily a money laundering operation. It was a slush fund for all of these left-wing special interests. In fact, if you follow Data Republican, she's part of Doge. She's helped uncover 7 major NGOs that were all funded to the tune of tens of millions of dollars each by USAID. So we're talking funds like NGOs like the National Endowment for Democracy, right? You've probably seen NED a lot in some of the headlines. The National Democrat Institute, even the Republicans got involved, the International Republican Institute. Establishment Republicans are no different than establishment Democrats. It's the uniparty. And they were all part of this mass money laundering operation involving ultimately tens of billions of our tax dollars being funneled to these left-wing causes both here and abroad. For example, as I understand, Bill Kristol, the warmongering, ultra-Trump hating neocon Bill Kristol, he's president of an organization called Defending Democracy. Molly Hemingway of the Federalist, she published a piece back in 2018 that reported on how virtually all of the Russian collusion conspiracy quackery that the legacy media was peddling at the time came from Bill Kristol's organization, this supposed defender of democracy organization. Well, when all's said and done, we are now finding out that he got paid at least in considerable part through the Rockefeller philanthropy advisors. And guess where they were getting their money from? They were a beneficiary of USAID funds. And so that's what you ended up that's what they did. Keep in mind, and I'm going to say this over and over again, now probably for the next 4 years, right? We're not uncovering waste here. We're not uncovering a system that has been abused. We're uncovering a system that's working exactly the way it was meant to. Over the decades, establishment bureaucrats created a system that they intentionally determined to make them rich. And you could see it just in the pattern of what was just unveiled. So tax money goes to USAID. Then if you want access to that tax money, you start some front organization and you call it something like, Citizens United for Democracy. Then you get tens of millions of dollars sent your way. You spend a portion of it on some Democrat antic here or there, and then you and your board pocket the rest. All of these organizations had executives making 6, 7-figure salaries. Oh, and then what's essential, sorry, I didn't close the loop there. Then you have to make sure that you contribute, you donate money to the Democrats, who then make sure, and establishment Republicans as well, let's be fair, who then make sure that USAID funds continue to pour into your front organization. And they know you can get these USAID funds because they come from our tax dollars. And so one of the primary ways you do that kickback, you contribute to the Democrats, is how? Through what organization? ActBlue. So that would explain why once USAID gets shut down, and then all of these Citizens United for Democracy NGOs end up comparably getting shut down, that would explain why ActBlue all of a sudden has to get shut down, because they are part of this. They are literally an intrinsic part of this loop of a money laundering scheme, a slush fund. And that's why more and more voices are calling for ActBlue to get investigated, especially in light of how it imploded in the shadow of the cessation of the USAID and its financial distributions. And it's not just ActBlue. Isn't it interesting that now that the gravy train's been cut off, isn't it interesting we're seeing so many layoffs in the various legacy media outlets? We know they were getting money, right? Politico was getting millions. AP, millions. So all of a sudden now we're seeing people like Joy Reid and Lester Holt and Jim Acosta and Chuck Todd and Don Lemon. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. And now along with them, we're seeing the whole web of NGOs like George Soros's Open Societies foundations systematically getting dismantled. Keep in mind, Soros's Open Societies foundations have largely closed down all operations in Europe right now. It's incredible stuff. The clear takeaway here in all of this is that what's really being revealed in real time is just what a sham the Democrat Party and the political left really are. I mean, the most exciting aspect of Doge is how it's revealing for all to see that the entire political facade of the radical left is actually fake. It's fabricated. It's a farce. Peter St. Onge pointed this out in a great tweet. It's all tax-funded astroturf. Aesthetica said something very similar. What we're finding out in real time is the entire modern left is just smoke and mirrors. There's no left-wing voter base. They're a 10% lunatic fringe. All the elections are rigged and fake. All the liberal media outlets, they have got no audience. They're kept alive by USAID funding. All their politicians and political pundits are paid by USAID to say what the government wants. The whole thing was a house of cards. Now, Moving on to the immigration front, because we've got a big breaking story here. Have you seen this? This was being discussed, by many commentators. They were talking about this during the campaign. Trump is going to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to facilitate the mass deportations of illegal migrants. Now, he's repeatedly vowed to take such action on the campaign trail. And now it's being reported that the plan is indeed about to be set in motion. This, according to CNN White House correspondent Aliana Trini, who reported the move in a post on X. She writes, quote, the Trump administration is expected to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a sweeping wartime authority in the coming days. The move is designed to speed up the president's mass deportation pledge. There should be another one too. The announcement, which could be made as soon as tomorrow, will come in the form of a presidential proclamation. The move would likely pave the way for quicker removals of certain immigrants. So the Alien Enemies Act was originally intended to be used with the United States when the United States found itself in a war with another country, or if a foreign government is invaded or threatened to invade. And even though the law was enacted in 1798, it's still on the books. It still remains in effect today, but has largely been ignored. It's rarely been used in the modern age. But the key here is that it grants the president sweeping authority to apprehend, restrain, and deport non-citizens. And what it seems to do is that it speeds up the whole deportation process, and that illegal migrants under the act are just not subject to the same due process that applies to U.S. citizens. So if their deportation is challenged in court, invoking this act would at least theoretically speed up that process. Regardless, the big takeaway here, of course, is that Trump is absolutely serious about mass deportations. This is not a show. Reports are that he's very frustrated regarding how slow the deportation process has been. He wants millions, mark that, millions of migrants removed from the country by the midterms. And we're just not seeing a pace that's going to be able to accomplish that. So it seems like he's using every single tool at his disposal to ensure that the biggest mass deportation operation in American history lives up to its name and its expectations. All this is to say that when it comes to their love of open borders, their money laundering operations, and even their precious BLM Boulevard, the world of woke liberal Democrats is indeed being systemically dismantled. Unfortunately, after 4 years of bumbling Biden, Americans still have kitchen table problems. A lot of us are carrying really high credit card balances that charge us 20% or more each and every month. Gang, it's time to get rid of those. So homeowners, if you've been waiting to figure out how to get your finances in order, you need to call my friends at American Financing today. American Financing's salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you tap into their home's equity to get out of high-interest debt. Get this, American Financing is saving their average customer $800 a month just by doing this alone. Saving that kind of money every month should make this decision really easy. All it takes is a 10-minute, no-cost, no-obligation phone call to find out how much you can save. And to make it even sweeter, if you start today, you might be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. Call American Financing today, 866-889-1776. That's 866-889-1776. Or click the link below and visit them at americanfinancing.net/Turley.
So we spend $200 billion a year subsidizing Canada. We don't have to do that. And frankly, the way that gets solved is Canada should honestly become our 51st state. We wouldn't have a northern border problem. We wouldn't have a tariff problem. They don't have much. They spend very little, as you know, the least of almost anybody on military. And we spend the most of anybody on military.
Trump's discussion on Canada has been quite controversial, to say the least. Trump's unpredictable tariff policies have been leaving Canadians on edge. And here in the States, many of us are a bit confused about what Trump is actually trying to accomplish with both his tariffs and his taunts. While the media engages in its usual fear mongering about Trump's tariffs on Canada, ironically, they're unusually silent about a significant elephant in the room, and that's China's recent imposition of 100% tariffs on Canada's vital agricultural products. So, who's fueling this chaos and confusion? Well, I think a lot of the blame has to be laid at the feet of the legacy media, of course. They continue to stoke fears at every angle. But the media's silence on China's aggressive tactics while targeting Trump's strategic tariffs raises questions. Meanwhile, Canada is facing a political landscape that's rapidly changing and deeply concerning. The rise of the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau over the last decade has brought unprecedented challenges to Canadian sovereignty, economic stability, and perhaps most especially cultural identity. We're seeing an alarming trend where mainstream media and government narratives collide to suppress dissenting opinions. Every day, Canadians are sounding alarms over inflation, increasing taxes, and a government that seems more concerned with appeasing globalist agendas than protecting its citizens' interests. This spiraling madness has fueled a growing sentiment among the population that enough is enough. So, who are the leaders in Canada that may be able to restore the nation to a place of sanity after nearly a decade of Trudeau? Well, many are pointing to conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who's had many iconic moments silencing the woke media. I'm sure many of you remember he's the fellow who decimated a liberal reporter while calmly munching on an apple. Or others have pointed to Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party, the Canadian equivalent to MAGA. Well, joining us today is Richard Surrett. Richard is a talk show host and insightful cultural and political analyst who's here to unravel the real story behind the chaos and offer insights that have directly benefited many Canadians. Make sure to click on the link below to tune in to Richard's broadcasts. They're awesome. I've had the honor of being on them many times, and now he's on mine. So, Richard, welcome. Great to see you, my friend.
Hey, Dr. Steve, what a real thrill this is for me. Thank you so much.
Well, the thrill is mine. Thank you. Yes, it's really awesome to have. I guess instead of having reciprocal tariffs, we're having reciprocal appearances on each other's show. So it's great seeing you again, my friend. Always a pleasure. We live in interesting times, do we not, Richard?
Well, yeah, it's a Chinese curse.
It's a Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. Exactly. It is a curse. Now, it's interesting because you and I have been talking about particularly these populist trends together for what now? It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, let's start with the media's coverage and all this, particularly what appears to be, what it seems to me, for me, a double standard. So they're fear mongering over Trump's tariff threats, all the while ignoring China's very significant 100% tariffs on Canadian agricultural products. So why do you think this double standard exists, and what really is going on with these tariff discussions?
Well, in terms of the legacy media, or the lamestream media, as I call it, or the bought and paid for media, they're basically carrying water for the Liberal government. In fact, they're subsidized. Most of the media up here is subsidized by the federal government. And then, of course, we have the state broadcaster, the CBC, which is like, imagine if the taxpayers were paying for CNN.
Yeah.
And then CNN turns around using your taxpayer money and telling you how horrible you are as a conservative. That's the CBC, $1.4 billion, and then they hit us over the head.
Wow.
So they're basically, they've been captured. It's a massive subsidy going into the lamestream media. So they're propping up the Liberal government. And Pierre Poilievre, if he forms the next government, he's promised to defund the CBC. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, with China, because as you say, they've retaliated because we slapped tariffs on their electric vehicles. So we're slapping a vehicle or a tariff on an electric vehicle from China that nobody wants, so that we can protect our EV industry here, so that we're forced to buy EVs that nobody can afford. which is just a complete, it's a ridiculous paradox. So in retaliation, the Chinese have slapped 100% tariffs on many of our agricultural products like soy and canola oil and pork. It's a huge market. It's a huge
Mm.
market. And it'll have devastating consequences on our farmers. And as you say, though, nobody's talking about it because we're all focused on the orange man is bad, and this is really what has given the Liberal Party new life. Unfortunately, it's been kind of a
Yeah.
gift to the Liberal Party
Yeah, I noticed
because
that.
up until President Trump mentioned 25% tariffs, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives were up by about 20 points
Yeah.
in the polls. Now, depending on the pollster, there's some outliers. Yes, there's some response bias and there's some push polls. But depending on the pollster, the Conservatives either have maybe a 10-point lead, which is still fairly comfortable, or in some polls, the Liberals are up by 3 or 4.
Mm.
Now, you would expect a bit of a bounce because the Liberals have just had a leadership convention, and Mark Carney has been shoehorned. And there's a lot of shenanigans. We could talk for hours about this,
Yes,
how he
that's
managed. And because of our parliamentary system, not only is he now the Liberal leader, he is also prime minister as of
Prime
tomorrow
Minister.
when he'll be sworn in. And so, unfortunately, the next election is going to be who hates Trump more,
Yeah.
Mark Carney and the Liberals, or Pierre Poilievre, who's been
Yeah.
really kind of painted into an awkward corner here.
Yeah.
Because I think Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump would see eye to eye in a lot of things.
Absolutely.
But he can read the room. He sees the polls. 80% of Canadians are basically, wanting to fight back.
Yes, of
And
course.
and so Poilievre, he reads the tea leaves. He has no choice, unfortunately.
Right.
He's got to, go along with this. But it
Right.
really is silly because there's so many other things that we should be debating in an election. I mean, most of the economic problems in this country are self-inflicted.
Yeah.
We have, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you about because I've talked to you a little bit about this in many ways. I think even Jordan Peterson said something like this that in many respects, Trump is sort of calling out the last 10 years of Canada's own self-infliction, as it were. And I, I'm curious if you could address that while at the same time addressing if you know what is Trump actually trying to accomplish here? What's his name from Shark Tank? Kevin O'Leary, Canadian. He said Trump doesn't want Canada to be actually the 51st state, but he does want the economies to combine. He wants the mass market of the United States combined with Canada's second to none natural resources. So what's your take on what Trump is actually trying to accomplish, especially in light of some self-inflicted wounds in Canada?
Right. Well, ostensibly, it's about fentanyl that's supposedly pouring across the border from Canada. And we've had some major fentanyl labs just busted by the RCMP. Now, they've apprehended about, I think it was 47 kilograms or 47 pounds of fentanyl at the border, which
Wow.
doesn't seem like a
Yeah.
lot compared to the Mexican border, of course, which is, where most of the fentanyl is coming from. But if you consider, I think is it 2 grams is enough to kill a person.
Wow.
So we're talking about, potentially something like, I don't know, 9 million lives that could be
Right.
destroyed by 47 pounds. That's how much has been apprehended. Who knows really the real number that's coming across the border? I don't think that's really the reason. He also talks about illegals coming across. And it's true. We don't know who's in this country, let alone who's slipping from our country into your country. I mean, that's
Right.
a whole other matter. I think this is really kind of a Monroe Doctrine 2.0. And the original Monroe Doctrine, of course, was from the 1820s, was to stem any European influence into North America. I think Monroe Doctrine 2.0 is about Chinese influence in North America. And Canada has a China problem. Even our own RCMP and CSIS, that's our version of the CIA, our civilian spy agency, has noted for decades Chinese infiltration into this country in all of our institutions. huge amounts of Chinese drug money and money laundering happening in this country, particularly in Vancouver. And then we had an investigation, official hearings into Chinese interference in our elections. And getting back to the Liberal Party, for example, their nomination process for their MPs in the individual ridings, I mean, it's the Wild West. You don't even have to be a citizen.
Wow.
And in one particular riding, the member of parliament, Han Dong, in the riding of Don Valley North, or I call it the People's Republic of Don Valley North, they were shipping in Chinese foreign students and telling them how to vote. So, and then we have, so we have a situation where we don't know, for example, in the last leadership vote, who was voting for Mark Carney. Were these 14-year-old Chinese students? Was it, under the direction of Beijing? It's the way the system is currently set up with the Liberal Party. You could have foreigners, basically voting for the leader and electing, in this case, the next prime minister.
Wow.
And also, we have the Arctic, which is pretty much undefended in northern Canada, and obviously Donald Trump is very concerned about that.
Yeah.
And China has, they're sending scientific vessels up there and so forth. They would love
via Russia, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they want control. They've already invested heavily in Canadian resource companies in the far north. We're sort of giving that away. So I think that is a large part of what this is really all about. Kind of a Monroe Doctrine 2.0. To me, Canada, it's like Yellowstone, the TV series. We've got this huge ranch, and it's great if you can keep it. We don't spend the money on defense. I don't think we can keep it under current circumstances, unless, of course, we saddle up with the United States and we become sort of Fortress North America, which ultimately I think is what we need to do in a very hostile, multipolar world.
Right.
Fortress North America.
Right. Fortress North America. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Again, the whole 51st state thing is, everyone's like, that's not going to happen. But some kind of renewed civilizational relationship seems to be in the cards. Yeah. Which is really very exciting in many respects. So I think your elections are 60 days away? How far away are they? 2 months or so?
We don't know, because we don't really have set
okay.
term limits.
I thought they were set. I was incorrect on that then.
Well, I think they have to occur by October the 26th of this year.
Okay.
But there may be a loophole where they could extend it up until October of 2026. So a year and a half from now. And Mark Carney, he wrote a book called Values back in 2021, and he talks about, and this is what makes this guy so sinister and scary. And he's a big advocate. He's a board member on the WEF.
Oh yeah, wasn't he in Europe? Didn't he have to fly back for? He hasn't been in Canada, as I understand it, for the last several years.
That's the other question. Is he even qualified as a resident? Would he even be allowed to vote in his own leadership race? Nobody seems to know where he's been for the last 10 years. He's got 3 passports. But if you read his memoir, I guess, Values, he talks about, he's a big fan of top-down government control, and he
managerialism.
The way the government responded to COVID. He's a huge fan of that, and he would do it again in a heartbeat for climate. He's a climate zealot, and I don't think he would hesitate to invoke emergency powers like we saw up here. You remember the trucker convoy in response, and
all the debanking. Yeah.
So I don't think he would hesitate to use the trade war as an excuse to invoke some sort of an emergency power and suspend elections.
Oh my! Wow. Yeah, that's been the one disappointment on my end, is just seeing Poilievre's and the Conservatives polls getting cut in half ever since Trump started kind of started with the taunts, as it were. So for us in the United States, you've got two real major kind of conservative leaders. You got Poilievre and the Conservative Party proper, and then you have Maxime Bernier of the People's Party, which, as I understand, sort of broke off from the from the Conservative Party. They have different approaches. How, Richard? What's your sense? How would you contrast both their approaches and their visions for Canada's future?
Well, just a bit of history here. Maxime Bernier, we call him Mad Max. He was in the Conservative Party. He was a cabinet minister in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's government. And then in 2018, the Conservatives had a leadership race. Maxime Bernier was running. I voted for Max. Many people did. And there was some ballot box shenanigans, let's say.
Yeah.
And he just lost by a sliver. Instead, we got Andrew Scheer, who was then followed by another Conservative light by the name of Aaron O'Toole. So many in the Conservative base are very, very skeptical, even of Pierre Poilievre, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Max quit the party after that and said the Conservative Party is intellectually and morally bankrupt, and then he formed the People's Party. Unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to start a party, a third party, or a fringe party, if you will, in this country. It's not like Europe, where a party can form and overnight, gain traction and maybe even form the opposition in a couple of election cycles. He's still struggling. He's around 3 or 4%. So,
so it's still very, very peripheral party. Yeah,
it is. So Max, I've gotten to know Max a little bit. I've had him on my daily show probably a dozen times at least. And we did a comparison after Donald Trump's inaugural address and compared his policy platform, your president's, with Max Bernier's on immigration, on defense, on wokeness. They align almost perfectly.
Right. Yeah. I always saw Maxime's very much. And the People's Party very much sort of the MAGA party proper, whereas the Conservatives, your Tories are very much like our kind of establishment rhino Republicans, right? Do you think that's a good comparison?
I think it's an excellent comparison. I think Pierre Poilievre might be a little bit better than Mitt Romney.
Yes,
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, he's just before Trudeau resigned and before the trade war talk started, he was starting to talk the talk. At least he was talking about, no men in women's safe spaces. And that took a lot of, we had to hammer away at that for a while, but finally he started to talk a little bit more openly and loosely. And we were encouraged in the Conservative base.
Yeah.
But then the trade war started and he's retreated. And now he's in this position of having to say, yes, Orange Man bad. I agree too.
Right. Which makes him sound like Trudeau. From the Southern ears, and we're like, they're the same. Well, they're facing the same threat, as it were. And so, that for me, that's the big. I've been championing Poilievre just because I see him realistically as having a chance in a way that Maxime doesn't. But that's been the one drawback for me. But looking ahead, and this is fascinating, particularly what you're talking about with the China connection. How do you see Canada's political landscape evolving, say, in the next 5 years? So we've got the United States under Trump's influence. We've got this rising multipolar world. So there's going to be, like you're talking about, sort of this North American sort of fortress in the midst of that world, I think, developing. You got China's growing aggression, and just the overall transition away from the decade of Trudeau. What do you see?
Well, I think there's kind of the fork in the road that we're at right now. And if it's Mark Carney and the Liberals who manage to somehow eke out another victory, and we're looking at another, let's say, 4 years, even in a minority government situation, the NDP, which is a socialist party, and the Green Party would prop up the Liberals, as they've done for the last 3.5 years. So we would have a continuance of the Trudeau era, which is with all its intended, wokeness. And I mean, you've got USAID, we've got the Foreign Affairs Ministry up here, spending $11 billion in the last 3 years on what was it, gender studies in Botswana or something. I can't remember.
Isn't it crazy?
And yet, they don't have money. We still have, our Indigenous brothers and sisters on reserves who don't have safe drinking water.
Right.
So if it's a continuance of Carney and the Liberal Party governance, then I think things will go south here very quickly.
Yeah.
If we have a conservative government, I think Pierre Poilievre will prove to be a good partner with the United States. He'll meet with Trump. He wants to bring our defense spending in line with NATO at least, or more, perhaps. 2% of GDP, I think it is, but we're below that right now. So Pierre Poilievre may not be the best choice for us, but he's the most probable, most practical alternative.
Yes.
But we have a lot of serious structural issues up here. I mean, we just don't have the infrastructure. We don't have pipelines. We still have interprovincial trade barriers. We've got a huge debt problem. So Poilievre is going to have to tackle that. And then the question is, will Canadian voters be patient as he tries to undo all of this damage from the last 10 years of Liberal governance? It's almost like they're ready to, the Liberals are ready to exit the House, but they're setting it on fire before they leave. And then it's like, you're here to clean up the ashes. Good luck with that.
Yeah, we face that too. Those last few months of Biden telling Ukraine, yeah, sure, send attack missiles into Russia. Sure, go right ahead. It's like, what are you doing exactly? Why, oh why? Yeah, just burn it all down. Just a quick question. I was very briefly, did you read about the delegation from Alberta? I think it was Alberta who came to DC
Yes,
to meet
Jeffrey
with
Rath.
Trump?
Yeah,
What
I just
is that?
spoke with Jeffrey Rath. Yeah.
Oh,
They're
you did?
serious.
Yeah. So what was can you just give us the scoop on that?
Well, actually, I don't know if the delegation has formally met yet with Trump officials, but Jeffrey Rath is this lawyer. He's part of something called the Prosperity Project in Alberta. They have more signed up members than the UCP, which is the governing party in Alberta, the United Conservative Party. They have more members that want out than the governing party. And they just had it. I mean, Alberta has a long list of grievances with what they call the Laurentian elites, Ontario and Quebec politicians, because of, transfer payments, for example. Alberta is the economic engine now. They send money to Ottawa, which is basically now just a giant change purse. And then they distribute the money to poor Newfoundland and poor Quebec. They cook their books so they make themselves look like a have-not province.
Right.
Alberta is sending money to Quebec so that they can lavish all of these social programs like $10 a day childcare for Quebecers. So Alberta is just fed up with the transfer payments, with an unelected Senate, and they're just tired going back to the the early '80s with Pierre Trudeau and his national energy program and so forth. They've had it. Right. So if there is going to be a 51st state, it's probably going to be Alberta, and maybe they'll drag Saskatchewan with them.
Oh yeah, Saskatchewan, absolutely. I could see that. Well, it's so for people who don't know, Alberta is often referred to as the Texas of Canada, right? So, and it is interesting that we do have it's a little bit on ice right now, but when we have liberal administrations in DC, Texas becomes very hot. So I've had Dan Miller on the show a couple of times, the president of the Texas National Party, and so interesting. I found that very interesting. Same kind of dynamics going on between Texas and Alberta. Very interesting stuff. Richard, I love your show. How can people stay in touch with you and what you're doing and the like? We'll have some links down below, but let us know where they can find you.
Yes, thank you. The Richard Syrett Show airs up here in Toronto on Saga 960, but for American listeners, they can stream it live at saga960am.ca. That's SAUGA, Saga, for Mississauga, where the transmitter is located. But they can also listen to the podcast, The Richard Syrett Show. It's available everywhere, The Richard Syrett Show, and my YouTube channel, just a brand new YouTube channel where I post some interviews and my monologues. That's at Richard Syrett 64, and it's SYRETT.
SYRETT, gang.
That's it. At Richard Syrett 64.
Absolutely wonderful stuff. Again, I really encourage you guys, because everybody here, you guys, we're very interested in civilizationalism. We're very interested in the rising multipolar world. If you want a very insightful, patriotic Canadian insight, Richard is the best. I love Richard's show, and his analysis is spot on. And I think you're going to get just a richer perspective, civilizational perspective, what's happening in the world. Very populist, very nationalist, very traditionalist. And so that's why we love you, Richard. And you might even hear me on there every once in a while. So
got to get you back on,
Richard,
Steve. Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Anytime, my friend. Anytime. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for this. Yeah, hopefully I love this kind of great North American power rising up. There's something going on there that I think is very doable. So yeah, before we know it, we might be neighbors.
Thank you. God bless you, Steve.
God bless you, Richard. Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you.
You all know that I'm very passionate about the fact that we simply can't rescue our nation if we don't first take care of ourselves. And health actually starts with our livers. Now, if you think about it, we throw everything at our livers: cholesterol, alcohol, toxins, Tylenol, statins, cigarettes, you name it. That's why so many of us have a sluggish, fatty liver that makes us gain weight and lose energy. But thanks to today's sponsor, there's a very real solution. Liver Health Formula is an all-natural supplement which contains 12 clinically proven botanicals that help recharge and protect your liver. It's manufactured right here in the USA and approved by independent American doctors. And if you click on that link below right now, you can try Liver Health Formula and receive a free bottle of blood sugar formula when you order today. So don't let a fatty liver keep you sluggish and inactive. Gang, you know, for me, this is very, very personal. I myself recently lost over 60 pounds, and I can say it was one of the best decisions I ever made. So now it's your turn. Click on that link below or go to getliverhelp.com/Turley and claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhelp.com/Turley.